Here we go. Welcome to Double Dribble Bucks. This is Seth Peterson. With me, as always, is my good friend Brett Sand. How's it going tonight, Brett?
It's going okay. Obviously, we all had a disappointing end to our Bucks season, but we're here to fix what we can. We know Doc is a loyal listener, and I'm sure he's taken some incredible notes about what we're going to talk about today. So it's time to get over our little, Bucks hangover and start working towards what are we going to do for next year. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, it should be a good conversation. First, we can start off just by celebrating Giannis, made All NBA first team again, despite some of the comments that were thrown out there by Doris Burke and Kendrick Perkins, and some other people. Yeah, any quick thoughts on that? I have a comment, but first we'll see what you got.
Yeah, I mean, based on how the media portrayed Giannis as kind of having apparently the worst year of any NBA player, from what I was gathering, he was lucky to be part of the NBA first team. I mean, the fact that he was getting zero MVP votes, I understand that it's like a season thing and it's how the team performs as part of it, but I don't know. I just think he had no love this year, and so getting at least first team, I mean, that was great. He was well deserved, and I think maybe it'll shut up some people. I don't know, maybe probably not, but very well deserved. He had a great year, despite all of the craziness that was the last season.
Yeah, and I can understand the All NBA being different than MVP. I think that it's fair to have some leeway there, and maybe the five best players aren't the top five MVP votes. Like that might make sense based on. I think team success, in my opinion, would have more to do with MVP. Either way, I guess what was interesting is that he was fourth in MVP and he was fourth in All NBA. I don't know the exact how people voted and differently or not differently, but he did end up the same spot. It felt like with MVP he was going to be lower than All NBA, but yeah, at the end of it all, he's pretty much in the same spot. Looking at the actual votes for All NBA, SGA and Jokic and Doncic are 1, 2, and 3, and SGA and Jokic were both unanimous. One person did not vote Luka first place. So how many do you know this before I say?
No, I don't. No, not at all.
Okay. How many first place votes? So out of 99, how many first place votes do you think Giannis got? Knowing that
based on
those other guys got 98, 99.
Yeah, I mean, based on what we got in the MVP voting, I'm going to say he got zero. I'm going to say it's going to be one of those surprises that he got zero first place votes.
He did not get zero. He got a lot.
Okay. Okay.
But he did not get, he wasn't on the same level as those three. He got 88. So 11 people did not vote him first. A funny thing about that is like 6 of those 11 work for ESPN. So the stat connected
I
I
misunderstood what you were saying. I understand it. Yes. Okay. Sorry. But yeah.
But the stat connected with that is 89% of the ballots he had a first place vote, but only 70% of the ESPN ballots did he get a first place. So ESPN is kind of down on him a little bit.
I'm going to do a little tangent here. So ESPN in our lifetime went from like, oh my gosh, we get to watch a network that's just sports and let's watch Sports Center and we can catch up on games that we don't get to see, to now it is like a network that I think knows probably the least about sports of any network. And it is the most laughable network. I just really, it gets to the point I can't stand ESPN. Number one, you look at the TNT crew inside the NBA, which it sounds unfortunately like we're getting close to losing them, which is going to be just the worst thing in the world. But you look at ESPN, which is supposed to be this powerhouse network, and all they have is a bunch of idiots that either yell over each other or are so like monotone through the whole thing. It's like nobody wants to hear you talk. You need to stop talking, mix it up in some way. All of you have worst takes. I care nothing about what you have to say. Oh my gosh, it is not surprising that of the 11 people that didn't vote for Giannis, 6 of them from ESPN, because it's a garbage network. They don't know what they're doing. They should have lost the rights to the NBA and went to NBC and TNT versus ESPN keeping it, because all they're doing is ruining it. All they're doing is ruining it. I'm going to stop myself right now, but I really just cannot stand the way that ESPN runs things anymore. It's just absolutely horrendous. I don't have a problem necessarily with the in-game announcers, even though I think you could do better than Stan Van Gundy. I think, like, first of all, Stan Van Gundy was really that great of a coach that he got even a second job in broadcasting? I don't think so. It kind of seemed like he just like lived in Orlando for a while, got a job because his brother was pretty decent, and now he's like calling every NBA game. Like, that's kind of a weird thing, but I don't know. It's just horrendous. They pay these guys way too much money to have terrible takes. Anybody that did not vote for Giannis for first team should get fired on the spot. That's what I would do. First move into the ESPN studio.
I like it. Yes. I mean, it's just, he's so obviously a first team All NBA guy. It is surprising that someone wouldn't have him. You have 5 guys ahead of Giannis. So you have, you have Jalen Brunson and Jason Tatum and maybe Anthony Edwards. There's only, the only few votes, Brunson got 37, but Anthony Edwards got 3. Kevin Durant, he didn't deserve it this year, but he got 2. Well, yeah. And then there's Kawhi Leonard, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, and Domantas Sabonis got 1.
He's always getting like in there. Yeah, it's
that's it. So there weren't that many.
Look, I don't watch enough Kings games to know if Sabonis is really this good, but he's always getting thrown in there. Like, he's always got like a vote or two, and I don't know if his dad has like voting rights, and that's why part of it. But like, the thing is, like, are we getting to the point that Giannis is just so good and we expect so much from him that we're getting bored from it? That's why these people don't vote for it? Because to your point, Kevin Durant. Okay, come on. We're not talking about Kevin Durant from 10 years ago. This is Kevin Durant on the Phoenix Suns. Absolute garbage team. Nobody played well this year except Grayson Allen, who deserved the contract he got. But beyond that, nobody cared about the Suns. And Durant's probably going to find a way to force himself out of there. LeBron James, yeah, I'm happy that he's putting up numbers as a 39-year-old. That's impressive. But come on, like, let's stop playing this game here. And, Brunson, yeah, great story. The guy's exciting to watch. But I guarantee you can ask NBA players, would you rather watch Giannis or Jalen Brunson? And the people that chose Jalen Brunson would be out of their mind. Great player, nothing against him, but Giannis is legitimately a guy that we as Bucks fans are still shocked at the way that he plays every single time. Jalen Brunson's like, wow, this guy's really good. Like, that's kind of the end of the comment. Oh, you got me fired up early, Seth. I don't know what's going on here.
Well, I had a fun activity. We could let's guess who is going to make next year's All-NBA first team. And I say that only because there's a lot of young guys who, like, this was the year that there was a big shift. LeBron James and Steph Curry are on the third team. They're not on the first team. They're not on the second team. They're on the third team. And so they're still there. They're still very good players. But Steph Curry didn't even get a first place vote. So, some of these old guys who have been the best players in the NBA for the past decade plus are kind of fading away. Giannis is losing some respect there, like we just talked about. And then guys like Anthony Edwards, who only got 3 first place votes, looking to next year, especially seeing him in the playoffs, I would guess Anthony Edwards is on that first team. So, yeah. So we have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Jason Tatum were the top 5. Maybe let's do it this way. Of those 5, who does not make it next year?
I could see Tatum falling out just because he is a good player on a great team. He's not a great player on a good team. It's nothing against him, but again, he's not. In the game that's on right now, he had 4 points in the first half. Like, I'm sorry, that's just not what great players do. And it's one game, and I get it, all that kind of stuff. But, like, he's the guy that would be my first, like, you're probably going to go and lose it to Anthony Edwards, who is more exciting, is becoming a bigger scorer. I mean, Anthony Edwards is only 22 years old. I mean, I'm anticipating him getting better and better and better. Tatum is fine. I mean, he's a good player. I'd take him on my team, but at the same time, I'm not building my franchise around him. And I think that's the reason I think he's the guy that I'd kick out first.
Yeah, I agree. And And yeah, let's have the Tatum conversation. Like Jason Tatum is a very good player. He's just not like the best player in the NBA and never will be. He never is going to be in that conversation, or he shouldn't be.
Right. He
Yeah,
shouldn't be,
and
right?
this year you could see it so clearly with Anthony Edwards just jumping up to Michael Jordan comparisons and just carrying his team past the Nuggets, the champions from last year. Like Anthony Edwards has that feel and that look, and he plays like he's going to be maybe the best player in the NBA. Like I could see that he's in that realm. Jason Tatum is Paul George. He's the second
Yes.
coming of Paul George. Like that's exactly who he is. A very good player who just isn't elite, elite, elite. He's not like a top 5 guy. And he's still young. We all talk about him. You know, wow, he's like 20 years old, whatever. I don't think he's 26 now, maybe. But sure, he's still young. He's still like in his prime or about to be, maybe even getting better potentially. I just feel like we would have seen it by now, you know. And he was so good, and on, like you said, such a good team. I mean, he's always been on a great team. Boston's been good for a while. And so the expectations have kind of been there. And for some reason, they just stay there. Like most guys, we get to a point where we all agree he's not the guy. But for some reason, he still gets that conversation as if he is like on Giannis's level or on Jokic or Doncic. Like he's just not that guy. And I don't know why we all don't see that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Paul George comparison is dead on. And, real quick, the interesting thing is, I don't know if you recall, but the reason that SGA is on Oklahoma is because of the Paul George trade. Oklahoma traded Paul George to the Clippers to get SGA, another player, and like 5 first-round picks. I mean, talk about like the ultimate like you won prize. That's the type of thing that like if Boston doesn't win it this year, which I mean, we've talked about this multiple times, they have to win. If they don't win, it's an epic failure for them, especially because look, we both think the Pacers have an opportunity to beat them here, but I think they are absolutely going to get smoked. Whoever comes out of the West. But if somebody trades for Tatum, Boston will win that trade. I'll call it right now because someone will overpay for a guy that's just never going to be the guy. I mean, he's always going to be the guy that's going to get 4th place, 5th place in the MVP voting at best. But you're never really going to expect him to win it. But again, very good player. It's just not going to ever get to that next level. The Giannis or even being in the same sentence, I think, with Giannis is a complete disrespect. It's just, and I think it has to be the small market. I think the narrative with Giannis is just hurt because he is in Milwaukee, and it's, I love it as a Bucks fan that he seems to be loyal here, and he's like, I'm going to win where I'm at. The Bucks have done absolutely nothing but give him everything that he possibly could want to be here. But that's again going back to my narrative of ESPN. They only want to talk about the big market teams. That's why you talk about 39-year-old LeBron, who had the team had a crap year, and they're thinking about hiring JJ Redick, and somehow that's going to be the savior of their franchise. When it's like, what are you talking about? You have, yes, I understand a small market team, but a team that's got Giannis and Dame, and that's all you're going to talk about is 39-year-old LeBron, who is forcing the league to draft his 6-foot son who averages 5 points a game because he might play with them. Like, the league is starting to get a little crazy with some of that kind of stuff. You need to focus back on some of these players and what they're actually contributing. And so, I think it's just this Giannis hate, and going back, Tatum is just, he's fine, but he's a second team NBA player. I think for the next couple of years, that's where I kind of rank him.
Yeah, well, let's move on to the Bucks season. Kind of maybe get our final thoughts on how we thought this season went. How disappointing? I mean, it was disappointing. I think we can agree. So, how disappointing was it? The Damian Lillard, obviously a big change, all that. So, and maybe let's look at it from starting when the season started. Let's not rate the GM moves that happened last summer, but let's just start. Hey, we have Dame's on the team. We had Griffin as coach when we started. How do we think about the season from October through May? What are your thoughts on how, maybe rank it on a scale of 1 to 10, how disappointing was the season for you?
Well, I'm going to say the disappointment has to be above a 5 just because the moment you got Dame, every Bucks fan, I think, was like, all right, we're going to the finals. Like, this is a huge upgrade. This is going to be fantastic. We really didn't spend a lot of time thinking about what was the impact of this trade. In my mind, I think the season was over during the in-season tournament. And I say that because, number one, that was the coaching change. And that was kind of a lot of people could look at the Doc hiring as, let's see if we can fix this for a playoff run. Looking back, it was our white flag to be like, the season's not going to happen. That's the way I looked at it, because it's like, you don't change your coach, because there's no way that the Bucks or Doc Rivers or Giannis or anybody thought Doc coming in is going to get us to win the championship this year. They just couldn't think that, because it would just be such a stupid move. We were getting absolutely run by the Pacers. The in-season tournament really kind of solidified the fact that something isn't working. It's potentially only going to get worse. We've talked about the locker room kind of falling apart. As far as my ranking, I'm going to put my disappointment at about a 6.5. I think for most people it should be higher, but the reality is, having some clarity to realize what's going on, it's like, okay, you can't expect Dame and Giannis to run it back in year one. The NBA just doesn't work that way. You have to be able to, you have 5 guys on the court at any time. They have to be totally in sync, and it took them multiple games to get that. I think it was okay to remain optimistic, because the roster on paper, yeah, it was everything. But that chemistry really kind of showed itself. We had a coaching change. If we were still talking about having Bud and then we brought in Dame, I think the disappointment could have been higher, because it was the same system. Everybody is used to playing a certain way. Here comes Dame, get into the system that everybody knows, and we should be able to be good. But the reality is, you can't even lean on any single player to be like, okay, well, how does Adrian Griffin run his offense? I don't know. I'm learning it for the first time too. And then, as we were just getting absolutely destroyed by the Pacers, it was time to be like, all right, we got to do something else. We got to save the locker room at this point, because that's the big problem. And I think that's what that Doc hire was all about. Doc is a good coach. He has the ability to put together a staff and a team and build the philosophy that should be able to help us next year. But this year was all about like, hey, can we show some progress to make sure that Dame and Giannis aren't spending the entire offseason talking about how you ruined it and we got to get out of here. And I think that's what the Doc hire did for me, personally.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty disappointing overall, the season. I don't know. I think maybe like an 8, maybe is where I put it. But I think there's some understanding and some optimism in there too. So, you have a coach to start the season and he doesn't finish the season. Well, that's pretty disappointing. I mean, that's a 10, disappointing on the head coach scale, specifically that. Dame Lillard, we're expecting it to be incredible, and it was clunky, and it never really totally meshed. We had some games where it did, but it just didn't quite. They didn't really have a groove going at any point. I don't think we had like a week, even 1 week stretch of like, oh yeah, the Bucks are looking good. We had like one game here, one game there, and then injuries came in. So I mean, it's disappointing that we had injuries. It's not, what are you going to do about it? And you have to just deal with it and get through it and not complain about it. That's the NBA. But the second half of the season, pretty much Doc's whole tenure so far, we didn't really have our team. So it's kind of even hard to assess, part of the season, because they just weren't playing together. And then we didn't have Giannis in the playoffs. So, I mean, that's disappointing in itself.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
I think there's a disappointment level at the beginning of the season, the midseason, and the playoffs. Because the beginning of the season, like if you and I were doing this podcast and we just got the notification that Dame was joining the Bucks, and then all of a sudden future us jumped in and said, by the way, you're not even going to get out of the first round of the playoffs. Disappointment level of 10 would have been through the roof, right?
Yes.
Like, are you kidding me? Mid-season is where it starts to kind of die down, because you're like, all right, well, our record is still good. We're still in second place, but you could start to see some cracks. So then you start kind of falling. And I think that's why I landed on a 6.5, because by the end of the season, I was at the point where I'm like, well, this just doesn't make sense. Like, of course we're not going to win, because, the disappointment levels on all these different areas were so big. Like you said, losing a coach is a 10, injuries is a 10, the chemistry is a 10, but it's almost like, how many hits am I going to take before I'm just like, all right, well, I realize it's probably not going to happen this year. And I think that's kind of where I got where I was at, because in a vacuum, every one of those things, yeah, it's a 10. Like, should have been the year, but you have to just be like, okay, well, as I start to add up these things, it makes a lot more sense that none of these things should have worked together. It was just like everything was against us almost when you look back at it.
Yeah, one thing that gives me some optimism is looking at both Minnesota and Dallas, who are both still playing right now in the Western Conference Finals. If you look at those teams a year ago, there was huge disappointment for both of those teams. Huge disappointment. And Minnesota made that gigantic trade for Gobert, gave away their future for them, and then everyone said this isn't going to work. It did not work at all that first season.
It looked horrible. Yeah, terrible. Absolutely.
And it was like, your team sucks for the next decade. Like, you're in hell right now. That's what it kind of felt like. And that's what a lot of people were saying. Like, how are you going to get out of this? I mean, you have Anthony Edwards, and he looks like he's going to be awesome. Maybe something can happen. Maybe are you going to trade Cat? Everyone's like, they got to trade Cat. He's definitely getting traded. Then they made no changes. And it kind of seems like they didn't even look around. Like, they were committed to that group. Well, come this year, they're amazing all season. So did they just need a year to figure it out, to figure out how to play with each other? Because bringing in Gobert is a big change. He's kind of plugging up the lane a little bit for Anthony Edwards. That's kind of the problem last year. Edwards couldn't get downhill, get to the rim as much as he would normally do that. But then you take him off the court. Obviously, that sucks because you just gave up everything for him. But then you lose his defense. So, yeah, it was just like a big mess over there. But, yeah, after the season, so then I don't know, over the summer, they must have made some changes. They had the same coach. I'm pretty sure Finch has been there for a little bit.
Yeah.
And they were great from the beginning, from October. They were awesome. And now here they are in the Western Conference Finals. They just beat Denver. They look incredible. They do have Jaden McDaniels. I think he punched a wall last year, and that's why he missed the playoffs. So, and they actually played Denver pretty good last year. I think they lost 4-1, but it was a pretty competitive 4-1. So maybe they were getting it together at the end of last year. But either way, the point is, it took a year for them, and it actually looked pretty bad, and a lot of negative talk about it. Okay, Dallas, same thing. They didn't even make the play-in game last year. That is a huge disappointment. You have Luka Doncic on your team. Any day now, you're thinking, like, he's going to force a trade. Like, I'm not going to deal with this. You got Kyrie Irving, like, no one trusted him outside of Dallas, who traded for him. And so, yeah, it didn't work out last year. Didn't even make the playoffs. That trade happened, at the end of last year. But anyhow, looked bad. No one trusted Kyrie. I wrote him off. I'm like, Dallas is not a serious team. I did not take them seriously at all. Well, here they are in the Western Conference Finals, looking like a really good team. And one of the main issues with them was defense, and they look pretty good. I mean, that's maybe going on a tangent into another thing. Defense is so key. I mean, we know that every year, but it's like we forget about it because then we set all these offensive records in the season, and the Pacers are a crazy team with all this offense. But even the Pacers, defense is why they are where they are. Like, they beat the Bucks with their defense, with that full court press that they were doing and just not letting Damian Lillard get the ball. They did the same sort of thing with Brunson. Nesmith is awesome. I don't know where this guy came from. Like, I don't even really know who he is until we played against him, and he's outstanding. Anyway, that was a little tangent, but back to just the optimism of maybe it takes a year with these, getting a Damian Lillard, adding him to your team, just a completely different dynamic to our team. How is he going to mix in with Giannis, with Middleton? It's going to take time. Maybe it takes a whole year. Maybe they need a summer together. And that's what Damian Lillard was talking about at that press conference after they lost. So hopefully there's truth in that. And I guess I'm optimistic because I've seen it right now in Minnesota and Dallas. So hopefully that same kind of thing can happen with Milwaukee next year, and it just comes together and they're playing really well next year.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. It's we live in a sports world where everything is instantaneous. It's you look at we just had the NFL draft and you have all these people and they're like, what can they contribute right away? It's like, well, you have to remember they haven't even played in this league before. It's bigger, faster, stronger across the board. And so you're already setting up these people to be like, in many of these cases, 20-year-old kids. It's like if they don't come out the gate swinging, it's like, what are they, a bust? Like, come on, this doesn't work that way. On the flip side, you see the Green Bay Packers who develop somebody over a court number of years and then don't miss a beat when he finally comes in. And I think that's exactly kind of what's going on here. It's like, yes, basketball is different than football, but Damian Lillard plays a different point guard position than Drew Holiday. Drew Holiday is, really all about making assists, playing defense. He's not a scorer. He's not creating the play as much. That's what Dame is doing. That's a completely different point guard you have. It's not even like, when we got Drew Holiday instead of Eric Bledsoe. Well, that was just an obvious upgrade at an existing position, and it made a seamless transition. But you look at the Bucks group this year, it's like we didn't know we were getting Dame. The Malik Beasley fit made a lot of sense when Drew Holiday was our point guard, but when Damian Lillard came in, it was a terrible sign. But you had him, like, well, you got to find a way to make it work. And it was almost like we were running a D'Antoni offense where it was like, all right, we're going to score a bunch of points and then just hope the defense kind of bails us out. But now we can potentially go into the next year being like, all right, well, who can we get to complement Dame at the shooting guard position? How can we complement, the way that Giannis plays, and how can we like factor these things in? And you're right. It's like, sometimes you just need a year to get these things to work, and then you're back where you need to be. The Minnesota Timberwolves looked like they were about to be the laughing stock of the NBA last year. It was like you gave up how much for Rudy Gobert, and he doesn't look like he fits. Nobody looks like they're happy. This is a disaster. You should all get fired. And, thankfully for that organization, they stuck with it and was like, let's just see what happens after like a full year together. And then here you go. So, I think he absolutely nailed it. And I also have the optimism for the Bucks. I mean, I'm always going to, but give them a summer to kind of play together, figure some things out, and go into next year and see how this goes.
And maybe real quick, how do you feel about Doc? Are you happy that Doc Rivers is our coach? Do you wish we could go back in time and hire Nick Nurse? Or do you wish that instead of getting Doc, we would have gotten Kenny Atkinson or I don't know, someone else? What do you think? Where do you feel about that?
So no, I'm not happy that we have Doc on a number of reasons. Number one, it means that Griffin failed, and it did, and so that's the number one. Like, if you're happy that we have Doc, it's you were rooting for Griffin to fail, and that's obviously not the way I was thinking. So first off the bat, I feel that doesn't work. I'm not a Nick Nurse guy. I know you were, but I think that Giannis had a lot into that one where it was like everything he heard was Nurse just runs his stars into the ground, and it was like, okay, that's not really what we're looking for here. But I do think Kenny Atkinson would have been a great decision. We talked a little bit about the report that Horst apparently wanted him and ownership kind of overruled, and so they wanted Doc. Which, if true, kind of sucks. I don't know if I love that much, but I don't hate Doc because of Doc, if that makes sense. I think he has a lot of experience, and I think maybe that was the thing, is we maybe took a huge swing that did not connect in the fact that maybe you shouldn't have taken a veteran team and put a first-year coach in there. We didn't have the stability that we thought we had, and we needed somebody that had a lot more experience. Yes, I understand Griffin was an assistant coach for a very long time. It's a difference when you're the head coach, and they should have found somebody that maybe was like Kenny, that was a former head coach and assistant and then ready to come back in, because maybe he could have learned some things and ready to come back. But I do still have optimism for Doc. He is taking teams deep in the playoffs. He's a respected coach. Players are going to listen to him. I've said this before. I still think that he is coaching the most talented group of players that he's ever had. And I think that's going to be a big factor. If we can kind of get some buy-in on this, that's kind of where I'm at. So, no, I'm not happy, but it's not because of him necessarily. It's all those other factors. How about you? How do you rate?
It could be much worse. I don't think Doc is terrible. I'm not on the campaign to fire Doc. I think he's is he better or worse than Bud? I'm not sure. I'd say I don't think he's worse than Bud. He has a champion. He won a championship. So, if we're going to compare championships, he's got that. He's, like you say, he's taken a lot of teams into the playoffs. So he has a ton of experience. He has won. I guess I didn't want to stick with Bud. So I guess in that sense, I'd rather have Doc than Bud, just to see, can he do it? Is he going to make more moves? He has done some things that I kind of felt good about. He changed that starting lineup. I was really happy about that, even though I don't think Pat Bev should be a starter. But looking at our roster, I think that was probably the right move. I guess now I would say Ajax, but I was okay with that. It made sense. And the whole point of it was like, we need defense. We don't need a 3-point shooter who does nothing else in that lineup. We need defense. So I like that. He saw that. He threw in some zone. He has great ATOs. Yeah, I think he's good, but I also kind of like you. I mean, I'd rather have somebody else. I feel like there's a number of coaches that are better than him in the NBA. I think he's going to be outcoached in the playoffs. If assuming we get there next year and we're in, I think he was outcoached against Carlisle. I mean, Rick Carlisle, I think, is a very, very good coach. I wish he was our coach. So I wish we had someone like that, a top 5 kind of a coach. I guess there's probably not that many. It's not like there's so many great coaches. I think there's probably, let's just say, 5 great coaches. And then there's probably a collection of guys that are kind of similar to each other. And I think Doc is in there. And so that's fine. It's not bad. I think we could do much worse. So I'm okay with it. I'm really curious to see what next year is after he has his guys, his whole summer, his coaching staff, all of that. Real curious to see how that goes. I like a lot of what he has to say in the press conferences and kind of how he talks. And he's kind of like no BS kind of stuff. So I kind of like the guy, but I wish we had somebody else. Yeah. And yeah, I would have, if I could go back in time and hire Nick Nurse, I would, even though I'm not so sure Nick Nurse is in that top 5 either, but I would be more comfortable with Nurse than Doc.
Yeah. Well, let me bring this up to you. So I posed a question on this, that Facebook group I talked about before. I said, is there any possibility that we don't bring Doc back? And the people just absolutely roasted me, thinking that I was the dumbest person that has ever existed. How could you say that? Like, we locked him into a contract.
This was immediately after the loss, or
immediately after the loss. This is right after we lost in the playoffs. And everyone was like, he signed a contract. Like, are you insane? It's year 1 of his contract. Like, and I said, well, hold on. I said, did we not just sign a coach to a multi-year deal? And it meant nothing to us. Like, we terminated him in no time. I said, so who cares if you pay Griffin $30 million and Doc $40 million to not coach the team? Because it doesn't affect the salary cap. It doesn't affect anything but the billionaire owner's pocketbook. And at the end of the day, all they want to do is win. They don't care about that much. Billions of dollars. When you have billions, millions don't mean anything to you. It really is so small. And the group just was destroying me. And they're like, he has 40 million reasons why he's going to still be back next year. And they didn't understand the point of, I wasn't advocating to fire him, but there's really no reason that we have to be loyal. There's no loyalty to Doc. He didn't do anything when he came in. It wasn't a guy that Giannis or Dame handpicked. He's a guy that we got to come out of retirement to try to fix the season. And to be honest, this is the type of thing that I could easily see the ownership group saying, hey, what would it take for you to come back? And he's like, well, I got a pretty sweet deal here, but you throw $40 million at me, I'm not going to say no. All right, here's $40 million to maybe take a swing for 1 year. That's a definite possibility. I don't think it's reality, to be clear, but there's literally nothing that the Bucks have done to show that they are loyal to bringing Doc back next year. And I think that is something that we have to think about. If for whatever crazy reason Eric Spoelstra gets let go from Miami, I think we're going to back up a truck and offer him everything he possibly could want to come to Milwaukee. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think we will have Doc back next year, but I think it's an interesting thing to think about, because just because we have Doc signed does not mean he's coming back. There's no reason that we have to bring him back. We're already paying 2 coaches to not coach us. So who cares about a third at that point?
Yeah, I think the logic is correct that if it's not working, if it's like the players are, walking out on the coach kind of the thing, and we need a new coach, I think the Bucks could do that, assuming the owner is willing to pay for it, like you said. So I think that logic is correct, that could happen. If Spoelstra is available, let's definitely try to get him. I think that's always the rule there. Always try to get Spoelstra. But I'm glad that the Bucks aren't doing that, because what we need is some consistency. We need to build something. And as we saw, that takes time. And as we were just talking about Minnesota and Dallas last year and all that. So if we can, the message is that they weren't thinking about that they're not thinking about that. He's back. He's already building his coaching staff. I mean, I think it's at this point, not happening.
Yeah.
And so I do appreciate that. I do like that. Let's get a normalcy to this team. We're not all looking over our backs. Like, this is our team. We're building something together. We have all off season to figure it out together. We're going to go through next season together. So I like that mentality, and that the Bucks aren't freaking out like the Suns are. The Bucks did fire their coach, mid-season. So I know you can just say the same thing here, but I feel like the Sun, if you look at the Suns situation, it's hard to see that Vogel is the problem. And so now you're going to start over with a new coach with this. And they had a new, Bradley Beal was a new teammate. I mean, that team doesn't make sense to me, but hey, last year, if we were talking about Minnesota, we'd all be saying, like, this team is so stupid. I can't believe they signed this guy, blah, 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 blah. So Phoenix, that's actually a good test case here. We'll see how Phoenix comes back next year. Yeah. But maybe they kind of blew it by firing their coach and losing that consistency. And now they're bringing in a new coach, and now they're going to be teaching, a different defensive strategy and offensive plan, and whatever they're doing is, I assume, not exactly the same as Vogel. And so now Booker and KD are, for the 3rd year in a row, learning new stuff, and maybe they're frustrated with it. Maybe they don't like it. Maybe they're going to act like Brooke Lopez and Bobby Portis and the guys on the Bucks who acted towards Griffin. Like, we're not doing that. Like, that's dumb. So yeah, that might have been a big mistake by the Suns. And so yeah, I appreciate the Bucks. I mean, again, firing the coach halfway through the season, I think they kind of had to buy in on this and just trust that this is going to work. And like we were saying, Doc is a good enough coach, a respected, a super experienced coach. He's the kind of coach where you can just be like, okay, we're going to give you time. We're not going to just give you a half a season. We're going to let you bring in your guys and do your thing, and then we'll see. So, maybe a year from now, if it's a disaster of a season, even though he's got 2 or 3 years left, whatever it is, fire him. If it sucks, fire him. But yeah, at this point, I'm glad the Bucks are saying, like, it's, we're not going to go that route, and nor is it was it Doc's fault? Like, no, we had all the injury issues. Giannis wasn't even there for the playoffs. I mean, we all believe the Bucks would have beat the Pacers if Giannis was there. We can't say for sure, but it certainly would have been a different series. So, I mean, you kind of have to just throw that away, even in itself. So yeah, real curious to see next season. Hopefully we have a healthy team. And yeah, and I guess maybe that's a good segue to the next thing is, let's talk about next year and what the Bucks need to do. Because I'm real curious as to what this team is going to look like. We know the core of the team. It's just going to be a couple of pieces here that change, that I think will change. And let me find this. I'll read this from John Horst, who is going to be our GM, because the Bucks won't let him talk to other teams, which is awesome. I don't realize that that's a thing. So they need permission to talk to another team. Why do you ever? And you can just say no, you can't talk to him. Why don't they always say, no, you can't talk to him? What's that?
Yeah, that is weird. I mean, from what I heard, it means that they're probably setting him up to be promoted to head of basketball operations, and he won't be the GM, and he'll hire his own GM. But yeah, good point. Just say no. No.
Like, you can't do that.
I don't want you to talk to him.
Well, I think John Horst has been awesome, and so I'm really glad he's still around. But this is what he had to say. I think this was like right after the loss, just kind of talking about next season. I'd say in assessing the team so far, we have a really good record, and that matters. We've had it in the past. We've had an elite offense, and I believe we not only have an elite offense in terms of rating on a total game, but we have a starting five that's elite offensively and very good defensively. We're great in late game situations. We have ISO scorers, we have pick and roll scorers, we have a lot of dynamic, flexible things that we can do offensively. Defensively, we have a talent group that can be better than what they've been so far. Is that a top 5? Is that top 10? Is that a top 15 defense? I don't know. And that's what we're trying to decide here with the roster as constructed. We're trying to understand where we can take it, having the players be better, the players have an accountability to do this, to be better. And then the coaching element. I know that we're going to be really good offensively. We got to figure out how to improve defensively consistently. So I love that he said that. He's thinking about defense as we're heading into the offseason, thankfully. So having read that and said that, what do you think our needs are for next season? Who do we need to get rid of, one or two guys, or are you focusing on just this is what we need to get and I don't know how we're going to get it? What are you thinking?
I think in general you have to go younger. The current roster just didn't work. It's kind of we talked about it earlier in the episode, how it's the changing of the guard of the NBA. You can't have these teams that are all these old players joining in that have limited skill set for a couple minutes off the bench. That's not enough. It just doesn't work that way. You can see it with the way that these young teams like the Pacers, Timberwolves, Thunder, they're all young. They have lots more energy. They can run and play full minutes all the time, and they're faster and they're quicker, and you have to compete with that. And so what happens is, number one, we already have some really good young guys. I mean, just look at even, we know Ajax, fan favorite, that we like him a lot. We also gave Chris Livingston a really big contract for a late second round player. So clearly the organization has something to do with him. Ty Washington apparently was playing really well in the G League, and enough that the Bucks are like paying him a better salary than, I guess, around that area as well. You got AJ Green, which we gave a pretty solid contract to for a guy of his talents and whatever. So it's like you have a lot of these key pieces here. Beauchamp might not work. He might not be the guy that we thought he was going to be. He's not seemed to be fitting in here. But overall, you cannot be bringing in Gallinaris and these older guys that are just not going to last. You got to go younger, more athletic, and quicker. It's the biggest thing. It's transition D, number one, was part of a coaching philosophy, but additionally, we weren't fast enough to get down there. You look at, we talk about in our Bucks text group, there was a text that came through and they're like, who the hell is Obi Toppin? And it's like, yeah, who the hell is Obi Toppin? The guy's killing it. I would love to have Obi Toppin.
Obi Toppin was a top 10 pick. I mean, he was somebody.
But he's on his second team.
Yeah,
so he wasn't valued.
Yep.
Right for the Knicks, and now he's found his role in the Pacers. But it's like, this is the type of thing that I'm hoping Horst can do, is be like, all right, I got some guys here. I'm going to find other guys that aren't being played properly on other teams. And those are the guys I'm going to try to target and bring them over. And then I'm going to try to force Doc to be like, look, I understand that you're an old coach and you like to play your veterans, but I'm going to moneyball you and make sure that the oldest guys you got are part of your starting lineup. After that, it's young guys. You're going to have to go into your bench to figure this out, because I'm not giving you Gallinaris and Pat Beverleys and all these, Jay Crowders to come in and waste time because you played with them 20 years ago. I want these guys that are able to run up and down the floor all day and then play a game, and it doesn't matter to them because they're ready. So it's got to be younger, more athletic. We have to have a game plan that's not just about launching threes all game, and I think that's what we had to do right now, because it was the way that the roster was set up at the beginning. We talked about it before. Beasley was there. He's a three-point shooter. Dame's a three-point shooter. Half our team's three-point shooters. That's the way it was working. But you got to do something different. You got to change it up. I'll throw it back to you in a second, but I think one of the things I heard that I actually think is pretty decent is bring Brook off the bench. I think we got to be open to that. I still think Brook has some minutes left in him. I don't think he is somebody that needs to retire. It's not like he's worthless. 2 years ago when he should have won Defensive Player of the Year and didn't. He's still performing, but I don't know that he needs to be our starter. Maybe he's a 15-minute guy off the bench, or maybe he's a starter with 15 minutes. I don't know. I don't know the right way to do that, but I think that could be some of it because he is great in certain areas, but he also looks very slow at times. And that goes back to that youth. How about you?
Yeah, let's stick there. Brook Lopez. Yeah, I think you nailed it. If he can be a guy that isn't necessarily the starter, that isn't assuming that he's going to get 30 minutes plus a game, that's where it needs to be. Because depending on the matchup, there's games where he should only be playing 10 minutes or less. And the Indiana Pacers are one of those matchups. He's just so slow. He's just so slow. I mean, I don't know if he's gotten slower, or maybe it's because we just played a super fast team and it was just so noticeable. But in some of those matchups, it just doesn't make sense that he's out there. Like, okay, great. He's spacing the floor. Okay, he's a rim protector. He's a really good rim protector. But when we're giving up 120 points, is he a good rim protector? Like, it doesn't seem to be helping in that
Right.
game, So, yeah, we need a backup big who can play defense. Like, that's in terms of what do the Bucks need next year. Whether he's going to start, whether he's going to back up Brook Lopez, how much is he going to play? I don't know. But what we do need is a mobile big man who's a defensive-minded big man. Like, he could be pretty bad on offense. If he can if he can shoot even 30% from three, that would be awesome. And maybe he's a 35% shooter from corner three. That just something like that, something where at least he'll shoot it and there's a threat of it going in, and they have to pay attention to him somewhat. They can't just completely leave him out there. I don't know who that is. I don't think that's easy to find, unfortunately, but that would be wonderful. So if we can at least try to get a guy, at the worst case scenario, just get a guy who can play defense. Maybe he can't shoot at all. Maybe he just sucks on offense, but just get someone who can at least guard Miles Turner. That would be great. Yeah. So yeah, because like Bobby Portis is our backup big and he's a scorer. He that's what he does. He'll get rebounds. He's not even that tall or big. He's not a big guy, Bobby Portis. So I don't know. We're just missing that second big. I mean, if you watch a Dallas game, you'll really miss it because you see those guys, Lively and I'm trying to blank on the other guy's name, but they just kind of switch off and they're both the same guy, basically, it seems like. And that was a rookie, actually, Lively. That was he was a top 10 pick, but we got some rookies playing real playoff minutes this year. So yeah, I think you nailed it with Brook. We need another center. He's getting older. He's 36, I think. So I don't know if that means he's 36 now or that maybe, is he 37 next year? Whatever. He's definitely getting older and older and nearing the end of his career, and that it means, his play might drop off. I'd say there's a decent chance he's not going to be as good next year as he was this year. So I think that's a key thing to look, whether you trade Brook or not. Like, I'm open to it. I would like to keep him because he's actually super valuable in other matchups, like not Indiana, not Golden State, whatever, certain teams. But I mean, if you're playing Minnesota, if you're playing Dallas, I think he's super valuable. And so depending on the team you're playing, he's awesome and he's worth that $23 million. It's just certain teams sit him down but we need someone to replace it. We have really no one to replace him on these, fast matchups with a center who's fast and shoots threes. Like Miles Turner was just an all-time like bad matchup for him. So yeah, that's one. Looking around the league, especially the playoffs, these teams who are getting far have just awesome long defenders. Aiden McDaniels, Derek Jones Jr., Aaron Nesmith, PJ Washington have all totally stepped up for their teams. PJ Washington was like on Charlotte. No one even knew who he was. Right. Like, oh yeah, that guy. I think he played for Kentucky. Yeah. Such a good trade by Dallas to get him. And they thought Grant Williams was going to be that guy. I guess he's just too much of an asshole or something. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah,
but
bad locker room.
Yeah, but those 4 guys, I mean, Jaden McDaniels is unbelievable. And so, like, it's just interesting because some of these guys are so valuable. Minnesota without Jaden McDaniels does not win that series. Like, there's no doubt about it. But I don't know how much he gets paid. I guess maybe I should have looked it up, but I'm assuming he's not getting paid a ton. You know, he's not like a $20 million guy. Maybe he will be now. But can we get a guy like that? And that's, again, not easy. But they're out there, and other teams got him. Dallas got PJ Washington at the trade deadline. So Derek Jones Jr. I think might have been too, or I don't know. But some of these guys are. I didn't even know who Aaron Nesmith was until we played.
So Jaden McDaniels, real quick. Now we have to like kind of settle ourselves down because NBA contracts are just ridiculous. He signed a 5-year, $131 million contract with Minnesota.
Okay, so he's making.
So he's
26.2
million a year. Yeah.
Okay. All right. He's getting paid more than I thought.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know what? He deserves it.
Yeah, he does.
He's
right.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, good for them. We need a guy like that. Yeah. At the very least, we need the PJ Tucker of 2021. A guy.
Yes.
We need a defensive-minded dog, right? That's who we want. You know, are they going to be offensive rebounding like PJ Tucker? Are they going to be, I'm going to mark up on your best player like Aaron Nesmith? I mean, that's really what I want. But at the very least, just give me a dog like PJ Tucker. And I prefer that they're bigger. You know, the issue with Pat Bev is he's small. He's a real small guy. He can be a good perimeter defender, but he can't do the same stuff as these guys that I'm mentioning. So that's the number one thing that I want if we can. And I've been saying I want a 3-and-D guy for a couple of years now, and I feel like we've missed an opportunity because I don't think like we're trying to get those guys. I feel like we've drafted guys that could become that, so maybe they are kind of trying, but I don't think we've traded for anyone like that. And so hopefully Horst can scour the league and find someone who's, you know, in Detroit or Charlotte or some bad team, you know, just someone who's kind of getting looked over because they're out there. So yeah, that's the number one thing. Before I give it back to you, the other thing that we need is a backup point guard, like a competent backup point guard, which I don't think Pat Bev is that. So I don't think Campaign is that either. So
no.
Someone, you know, Tyus Jones would be great, obviously. So I'm not sure who it is, but just someone who can come in and run point like a normal point guard. That would be nice. You know, someone who could bring the ball up, who protects the ball and isn't just like a 3-point shooter. You know, just give me a point guard. So that's it. I guess in addition to that, a defensive guard. So maybe the backup point guard is also the defensive guard. That would kind of be ideal. Might be tough to find. But there's a few guys you could go out and get who might work. Like Chris Dunn, I don't think is going to cost much. I think that's a guy I would sign, and hopefully he would work out. But I'll throw it back to you. What are you thinking?
Well, I mean, you're 100% right. It's focusing on the defense. It's finding, you know, the point guard, the more athletic big. But, you know, I'll throw out 3 things that I think are small but big at the same time. So number 1, hire the best strength and conditioning coach money can buy. If we're gonna have these soft tissue injury, get ahead of it. Don't waste any amount of money on that. That's got to be something that you got to fix. One of the things I hope Doc fixes is, you know, we talked about Brook a lot, and the big knock on Brook is how many times are we looking at him complaining to a ref? Oh, I can't believe that you called that. Oh, I can't believe you're not calling. But you look at the teams that are in the playoffs now. How often are you seeing that? Like almost never. It's like you kind of hope Doc just comes in there and be like, can you just stop bitching about the calls? Like, I get it. We're not getting them. That's my job. Just play the game. But I feel like we're so close to like legitimately losing multiple possessions because we're arguing about a call. That's like, I get it. I understand that you want the call. Maybe you're right. But let the coach do that. Let someone else figure about that because you're spending way too much time. You know, Brook, it seems like, number one, it takes him twice as long to get down the court, but the entire time he's going on the court, he's arguing to somebody I'm getting held, I'm getting blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I don't know. Like, you got to just stop doing that. It's just a waste of time. Move on. Let somebody else do it.
That should be a huge thing that is discussed in the team. Like, that's a big deal, especially when you're last in transition defense. Like,
yes,
just get back on defense and play the game. Did you see Game 7 of Minnesota-Denver? Like, Minnesota was not getting the calls. It wasn't going their way. Yet they came back from 20 down and just dominated that game. But it was like call after call. They had like 2 phantom calls on Jaden McDaniels, their most important defender. Every 50-50 call was going Denver's way. It was pretty heavy Denver. And it was like, what is going on here? They weren't really complaining about it. And they just played and dominated the game. You have to just play the game. You can only control what you can control. Yeah, the head coach needs to talk to the refs and make the points that they need to make. And during the regular season, every once in a while, get thrown out, for your team. All that's good and fair. But within the game, now, especially like in a playoff game, like, you got to win this game. Okay, we're not going to win by whining to the refs while we're getting back on defense, like you're saying, which is happening way too often. Sorry. Go on.
No, you're dead on. I mean, but the thing is, like, Brooke is the biggest offender of that, but Giannis isn't too far behind. I mean, the number of times that Giannis is complaining about a call or, making a play only hoping to get the foul, like, and Dame was doing the same thing, making plays only trying to get the foul. Like, just make the play. Let the team, let the coach argue about these fouls. Just make the play.
Yeah. Little tangent here, but especially with Damian Lillard, I don't think this will change, but I wish it would. Is makes plays where he's expecting to get a foul, right? He's like foul baiting. A lot of guys hate. A lot of fans don't like that. He's not the worst. He's not like James Harden, but he does that, and he does it kind of a lot. And just, I wish he wouldn't do it as much. But I think the thing that really hurts us is when and the other guys do this too. They'll go, they'll drive to the basket and kind of throw their bodies up, and fall to the ground and kind of assume that they're going to get a foul call, and they're not, and they don't necessarily get it. I mean, they're not necessarily fouled, right? But they're just kind of committed, and they throw it up and they play it out, and they fall to the ground, and they're out of the play now. I mean, the other team has it and it's coming back. So now we're down 5-4, and that happens too often. And when it's just, when you're playing the Pacers, you're giving them 2 points or 3. And so some of these teams are just totally taking advantage of that. And if you're doing that 10 times a game, like, that's pretty bad. I mean, it's basically a turnover. It's essentially a turnover.
Yeah.
Like it's a pretty bad play. And I don't know if NBA teams, I'm assuming they are looking at this, but I think they should be looking at that and looking at that play specifically and how many times it happens. And that can cost you a game. And so that's something I think Damian Lillard really should be thinking about, as to maybe I shouldn't just be throwing my body when the play is kind of a broken play. Like, maybe I should just pull it back, or just, pass it to someone, whatever it is. Just don't continually be assuming that I'm going to get a foul call if I throw my body. It's a net. I guess what I'm saying is, I think it's a net negative, that play. If we were to look at the whole season, how many times that happens and what happens, what is the, next 20 seconds after that play, like, what happens? I think it's a net negative. That's what it feels like. So I don't know. I've never really heard anyone talk about that. And I'm kind of curious if someone digs into the data on that.
Someone should. It's I'm not sure if you're a Ted Lasso fan, but it reminds me of an episode I just saw when the newer captain, they took him and made him play in the backyard that he grew up in, or whatever it was, like in the courts of like his neighborhood or something like that. And it was like the very first play, he got hit and he kind of looked around, and it was like, there's no rest here, dude. Like, we're playing. We're just like, you think about like the times we would play on a, backyard or driveway or something like that. And it's like blatant, obvious, fouls were called. But for the most part, it's like, hey, we're out here playing street ball. Like, this is how it works. Like, you almost got to like take these guys and be like, go play some street ball and remember what that's like, and not always look for the foul and just like try to play. And maybe that might correct it, because I don't know. Obviously, we watch more Bucks games than other games, but it's like it just seems so obvious, and I want somebody to like really get in there and be like, you got to stop doing this. Like, just play the game. So along those lines, my last one was just back to some basic fundamentals. We talked about how some of these foul moves are basic turnovers. Look at the casual passes or the situations where it would be like, the Pacers are playing full court defense, but we kind of are bringing the ball up slowly and almost looking around like, well, let me bring the ball up. It's like, that's like, you're playing in this old mindset of like, these are the ways that people used to play, and this is how that works. If you're living in that, you're never going to evolve as a team, and you're going to get totally run out by these younger teams that are like, you know what? I don't have to let you bring the ball up. I'm going to do a full court press. I understand that most people don't do that in the NBA, but we're going to, and we're going to get in your mind, and we're going to force you to bring the ball up, and you're going to get in problems. But, so many times I'm seeing these, like, we talked about it before, the pump fake to someone down low. They pump fake it 6 times, and then they still throw it, and it gets turned over. It was like, well,
Yes.
everybody saw that coming. Like, I don't even know why you still threw the pass. Or, these like half court passes that are lobs that get picked off, and you're like, well, yeah, that was obvious. Like, those are the types of things, like, reel it in and stop acting like games should be played the way you want them to be played, and realize the game is going to be different every single time. I mean, even in the game today, there was a play where Jaylen Brown got kicked in the back of the head, totally by accident. But the announcers were like, 70s and 80s, it's not even called. 90s, it's a hard foul. That's about it. Now they're looking at it for a flagrant, and you could see the guy didn't even realize that his foot hit the player as he was running away. And now we have to pause for a flagrant. Like, he's like, the game has changed. And that's the type of stuff that I'm looking at. It's like, I understand that you want to take your time bringing the ball up, and I understand you want to be able to do these passes, but the game is changing, and it's not to say that you haven't adapted to it, but stop doing these old school things that people would have been able to do 9 times out of 10, 15 years ago, and adjust and understand that it's quicker, and you have to play a totally different game.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I mean, that Bucks Pacers series did have that feel. Like, the Bucks weren't ready to just play. Like, they were like, this isn't how you're supposed to do it. Like, why are you guarding me 94 feet?
Yeah.
Yeah, they weren't ready for them to deny Dame the ball. It seemed like they were just kind of 2 steps behind and not ready to figure it out.
I hate to admit it, but it reminds me of a time that I was playing a pickup game. It was me and Gabe, and we were probably 16, and we played these 2 kids that were 10, but they were the only people playing at the playground. And we went in with a different mindset, and they killed us. And we were just like, that was the most embarrassing thing in the world, because we assumed they would play certain ways, and then we would assume these things would happen, and they did the opposite. And it was like, well, we just weren't ready for it. Like, we just were playing a pickup game, and it was like we had to go home because we couldn't show our face anymore. But that's the same type of thing. It's like, okay, you walk into this being like, well, we should be able to. The moment you start to be like, we should be able to, that's where the problem was. And
Yeah.
Not to interrupt you, but I think that's the way the Bucks Pacers game kind of felt for me.
I think what we're hitting on is the Bucks were a weak team. They were not tough. They did not look tough, feel tough. They didn't have that, and I was like waiting for it and looking for it. And I don't know why it's not there, but it was not there. I don't know if they the whole year was just too much and they just never believed in themselves or what it was. Giannis wasn't there and they just felt like this isn't going to happen. I don't know, but there was a lacking of toughness on this team that we need to get back next year.
Yes.
And so
get that dog.
I think the dog is going to be a big part of it. Yeah. So we'll see what they can do there. Kind of off topic. Here's just something I noticed. Curious on your thoughts about it, but I'm thinking watching the Nuggets play, Jamal Murray is kind of like a poor man's Damian Lillard. Like he's similar to Damian Lillard and maybe not quite as good. Like he's never made an all-star team. So, he's not as good, certainly during the season so far. But he is kind of similar in the sense that he he has off days. Some games he's 4 for 18 or whatever, just like bad shooting nights, and just doesn't have it. But he always has. You always are afraid of him at the end of the game. You're always thinking like he's gonna hit that big shot. Like I don't care if he's 4 for 18. I don't want him to have the ball with 10 seconds left and they could win the game. And he hit those 2-game winners against the Lakers in that first round series. So it was just kind of similar to Dame, where Dame will have these bad games, but you're always worried about him. There's always the gravity of the defense, double teaming and blitzing him, getting the ball out of his hands, and you don't want him to have the ball at the end of the game. We all talk about Dame time. It's like a real thing. It's legit. He's awesome clutch player. And yeah, so Jamal Murray is kind of a younger Damian Lillard, kind of following the same pattern, although again, just not as good, because Damian Lillard, I think, was making all-star teams all the time. And Jamal Murray's not, for whatever reason, but he's really good. When he's good, he's like a top 5 player. Like, he's incredible at times. So it was just kind of interesting. And then with that, it's like you got Murray and Jokic, and you have Dame and Giannis, and then the rest of the team's kind of filled in. And Chris Middleton, I'd say, is probably a better number 3 than what Denver has. Denver has that full team. They have the Aaron Gordon, like, that he can take on like the best defender. They have the KCP, the 3-and-D guy. They have Michael Porter Jr. as the 3-point guy. So their team really fits together pretty well. And that's what the Bucks need to figure out right now, is like, who's that starter next to Dame? Is Brook the starting center or not? Do we have a good lineup and are we going to play a Giannis at the 5? Because I feel, especially against like the Pacers, a Giannis at the 5 lineup, I think would be awesome if we have like that, if we have a really good like 3-and-D 4 guy. So yeah, I feel like we're so close. If we can just make the right couple of moves this off season, I think we might have the team.
I think so. Yeah, we got some young guys. We just need to find some missing pieces that aren't the, I wrote on my notes here, we don't want ring chasers like when Karl Malone and Gary Payton joined the Lakers. Like, I don't want that. Like, we need to find...
You nailed it. Don't get these old guys. Like, if we're going to get a flyer on someone, have them be 24 years old. Just don't get...
Just see what's going to go on. Yeah.
Don't get an unathletic guy. Like, I mean, like, what was the point of Gallinari? I don't understand, like, what he's doing on the team in the first place.
I have no idea. I mean, he had a couple moments in Game 5, I think it was. It was like, oh yeah, I guess he's okay, but that wasn't enough. And I mean, Jay Crowder was a terrible experiment. I mean, that was something maybe on paper seemed to be okay, but you did the PJ Tucker, you did the Jay Crowder. Like, let's get past that now. Let's go young. If you want to get one older guy, fine, get one older guy. But like, you had way too many, and it just didn't work. And I don't need that anymore. I need a young big. I need a young point guard, and I need defensive focus for everybody.
Yes. Okay. Last question before we're done. Brook, Bobby, PC. These are the guys that are most tradable, I would say, and most on the table for a trade. I mean, I'm sure you could trade Chris Middleton, but we don't want to. Okay, if you can keep, let's just say you can only keep one, Brook, Bobby, PC. Who do you want to keep on the team?
That's a tough one, but I'm going to have to say Bobby for a couple reasons. Number one, I think he's the youngest of the 3. So I think that's part of it. I think he's a better scorer of the 3. I think he brings that dog mentality off the bench for us.
Definitely a spark for sure.
Yeah, and I think I guess I look at it like Brook is probably, I guess I would guess would probably bring back the most if we traded him, just because he's a proven name. He's a 7-footer. I mean, Bobby's 6'10". I mean, that does make a difference. More of a defensive mindset, and I think, Bobby having that scoring off the bench is very key, having a big come off the bench that can score, especially if you kind of offset minutes with Giannis, then you're not really losing a ton of scoring. Not to say that Bobby and Giannis are in the same really conversation, but you know what I mean. I love Pat, but it's the other mindset. He's older. I think even though he's very disciplined and he brings that like mentor attitude that we need for some of these younger guys, I think I would hate to lose that because I think he really could work almost with those other guys to be like, this is what we're doing. And I think I'll put it this way. If I'm going to rank them, I think I'm going to say I'm going to keep Bobby, then Pat, then Brooke. And I hate to say it because I really like Brooke a lot. But I just think Brooke would probably get us the most if we traded him. As good as he is, he just looks so much slower than everybody else that's kind of where I came. How about you?
Yeah. 36, 37. Yeah, I think I mean, I think in the perfect world, I would say I'm keeping Brooke as a backup or as like, like we were talking about before. And you're getting these pieces that we're talking about. And maybe Chris Middleton doesn't play quite as much. And maybe he's kind of splitting time with like a 3-and-D guy, or maybe we're kind of playing with lineups. Maybe Chris Middleton is a 2 guard, actually, and we get a 3-and-D guy to step in the 3 spot. Anyway, so I'm kind of thinking maybe Brooke, but I don't like that he's so old and so slow. So that's my second. I'd say PC's actually my last of the 3, because Bobby's awesome off the bench for scoring. He's great, So if I could only keep one, considering the salaries and everything and age, I think my honest answer is Bobby is who I would keep. $12.5 million. He's 29. I think he's going to be just as good next year. I don't think he's going to drop off, while Brooke and PC, I'm afraid, are going to have a drop off, possibly.
Yeah.
So that's my answer. I kind of disagree. I think we can get the most from Bobby. Maybe I shouldn't say that.
I mean, maybe because of the age, probably, but
because of the age and because of the salary, $12.5 million, and then the next year, $13.5 million. I mean, was he the second in Six of the Man voting?
No, he was third.
Third. Okay, who was second?
Yeah.
Do you remember?
I don't.
Oh, you know what? The guy in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Whatever his name
Monk.
is. Malik Monk. Yeah, who was awesome. Actually, I thought he should have won. Anyhow,
so real quick, as you kind of pointed
good
on this, though, do you think Chris Middleton could be a 6-man?
I think that's ideal. If you can pay $30 million for a 6-man, I mean, a 6-man who plays 25, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Which I think Malik Monk probably, Malik Monk is finishing games a lot for Sacramento.
Sure. 6-man is, some people look down on that thing, but just because they don't start doesn't mean they don't end up with the most minutes or don't, whatever. And I think, Chris, with his injuries, maybe that actually suits him better. And if you start out with,
I think it's that
some more
the injuries,
defensive focus, and have him come in. Yeah,
the injuries, and I think he's lost more than a step on defense. I think that's part of the problem with the transition D is him, and I don't know. I just think on defense we're missing something with him in there, and so you have him and you have Damian Lillard, who are maybe just not, quite as good as you want them to be on defense. So I think that's where, for me, that's where it's coming from. Is if you can kind of just take a little bit of that off, but you're throwing in this 6-man piece, and you kind of play with this rotation of guys. Hopefully, you have 7 guys, and you're kind of moving them around as needed. That would be ideal. But, having said that, Chris Middleton was honestly unbelievable against Indiana. He's definitely a starter in the NBA.
Yeah.
So it's probably not going to happen. But yeah, if you somehow could replace Bobby with Chris as the 6-man, and then you had just a Jaden McDaniels type, in Chris Middleton's starting spot, I guess that would be ideal. But I don't know how you get that.
I don't either. I'm no expert with that, and I think that it's hard enough that we have over $100 million locked into 2 guys. I mean, that's going to be hard to build around in general, but I don't know. I think my last question, I guess I'm going to have for you, is with the draft coming up, we do have the 23rd overall pick. Would you say that if the Bucks draft somebody, they're committed to a youth movement, and if they trade it, they're not? Or I guess what would your thoughts be if they kept versus traded the pick?
Yeah, I mean, I think they need to be thinking we need a guy who can play, who maybe can play this year. Ajax played. Ajax was a rookie. He played. He should have played more. Every single Bucks fan was saying he should have played more. I guess that's part of it. Is Doc going to play him? Maybe John Horst talks to him. If I draft this guy, are you going to give him a shot? Or should we trade? Like, should I just trade this pick? It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess what are they? The 22nd or I don't know, what pick did they have?
23rd. They had 21st,
pick.
but they have the swap, so they're most likely going down to the 23rd.
Okay. It's not like a top 10 pick. That's pretty hit or miss. Who you're going to get at 23. It's like maybe they're good, maybe they're not. I don't know. NBA drafting.
A lot of rookie of the years have come out of the second round.
Is that true?
Well, I mean,
Malcolm Brogdon
was, yes. And Michael Carter, I think, was a second rounder.
Okay, I mean, there's some definitely really good second rounders.
Yeah. Chris Middleton was a second rounder.
If there's a trade to be had, they trade it. I guess to answer your question, if Horst is looking around, he's got these, PC and this and then the first round pick, like they're gonna do it if it makes sense. I'm sure they're shopping it around, but if they don't,
they are
what they want, then pick someone who can play. Pick a senior from Connecticut. Pick I don't know. Pick someone who can play now. Don't pick a project. Like I would be anti that.
No, yeah. We can't have a project. We need someone that can play. Somebody that is overlooked. I mean, that's the, back in the day, pick anybody from Virginia, and they're going to be a defensive stud, and that's all we need right now. So
exactly, yeah. Someone. I mean, if you get someone who can give you 10, 15 minutes in the playoffs next year, like that's a huge win. We're going to assume Ajax is stepping up to like a important role player position, if not a starter. Yeah. And Beauchamp, if we still have Beauchamp, that'd be amazing if he can turn it around. I'm sure he's going to be thrown in trade options, but we'll see what happens.
I would not be surprised if Beauchamp and the pick are sent somewhere. But at the same time, nobody likes the draft this year, so maybe we'll probably pick somebody.
They say that like, oh, this draft's like, do you know that? Because the 46th pick of this draft was the rookie of the year or whatever. This guy who everyone overlooked is Herb Jones. He's an awesome play starter who everybody wants, or Nembhard on the Pacers. Like there's a lot of guys out there that we don't think are good. And they are.
I think the GMs are just hoping that it's the next Wembanyama, and if it's not, they're like, it's all garbage. It's like, okay, well, sometimes you need to draft the next sixth man of the year, and sometimes you have to draft the next defensive player of the year. It doesn't always going to be the franchise-changing player. Like, just get over it. Like, I mean, we brought up Aaron Gordon. He was a number one pick, possibly, for Orlando.
Good question.
But maybe. I mean, he was a top pick for Orlando, and they thought he was going to change the franchise, and he didn't. But nobody looks at Aaron Gordon and says he's trash. I mean, his hair is trash, but he's not a trash player.
Very true. Yes. Yep. Good point. But I mean, what these winning teams have are awesome players around the edges, awesome role players. That's what we need. So, I mean, we're probably not going to draft the guy that's going to play 35 minutes a game in the playoffs, but for this rookie year, but we can get a guy who might help the first year, and he might become that guy in year 2 or year 3. Again, Nembhard, I think it's his second year, third year. I don't know, but he's starting for the Pacers, and he really was pretty great against Damian Lillard against the Bucks. He did a great job on that.
Yeah.
So, all right. Hour 23 minutes. Let's wrap it up, I think. So all you listeners, thousands, millions of you, subscribe and rate us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Email us at doubledribblebucks@gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at podddb. We'll come back about a month from now. We'll talk the draft, things like that. So yeah, send us all your questions. What do you want us to talk about? Let us know. On that note, anything you want to add, Brett?
No, hopefully we can get to a big mailbag. I know there's lots of
Yes.
questions coming in that we haven't gotten to, so hopefully we can do a mailbag episode. So send those in
Mailbag
as soon as you
episode.
can.
Yeah, August and September, I think we're going to be lacking for content. So yeah, we're going to need the mailbag episodes later this summer. So, okay. All right. Good pod. We'll see you next month. Until then, go Bucks.